In just 8 minutes, uncover 10 brutal takeaways from Pete Buttigieg's fiery chat with Tim Miller on Trump insulting his own voters, vanishing libertarians, GOP scams, Biden's COVID regrets, and why the future economy could be hell. Takeaway 1. Trump's lies are hurting his own voters. Pete Buttigieg does not hold back in saying that Donald Trump's biggest insult is aimed at his own supporters' intelligence. He explains how Trump makes promises he never intends to keep, like ending the war in Ukraine on day one, or magically lowering prices, which even his followers know are false. Pete points out that Trump keeps pretending to be strong against leaders like Putin, but actually gets played by them. He adds that this is not just incompetence, but a pattern of bluster mixed with real weakness. Tim Miller agrees, saying the idea that Trump is just negotiating or bluffing has been proven wrong again and again. For example, Trump claimed Putin, and he grew closer because of the so-called Russia hoax, which shows how deeply disconnected from reality the president has become. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 2. Libertarians are missing in action. Pete raises a blunt question that many in Washington are afraid to ask. He says, "Where the hell are the libertarians?" This is in response to the shocking situation where the U.S. government allegedly disappeared a person to a foreign prison in El Salvador without trial or due process. Pete is angry that people who used to scream about government overreach on things like water pollution are silent now when the government is shipping people to black sites. He mentions this as one of the most disturbing acts of Trump's presidency, adding that even Joe Rogan pushed back on it. For example, a makeup artist named Andre Romero was reportedly taken without warning and is now stuck in a prison in El Salvador, which has turned into a state where human rights barely exist. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 3, the GOP bill helps the rich and hurts the poor. Buttigieg gives a scathing review of what he sarcastically calls the big beautiful bill passed by Republicans. He explains that the bill has something awful for everyone. It gives tax cuts to the rich, throws 8 million Americans off their health insurance, and adds trillions to the national debt. Pete says, cutting taxes for the wealthy, destroying health insurance for millions, and adding to the debt is bad policy and bad politics. He also says working-class people will be hit hardest because many of them rely on programs like Medicaid, which the bill tries to shrink by adding harsh work requirements. For example, someone working unpredictable hours at a grocery store could suddenly lose health care just because their weekly hours dropped. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 4. The right is playing a long game with cuts. According to Pete, Republicans are smart enough to know that the policies they pass now will eventually hurt people, so they cleverly set them to kick in after the next election. He explains that cuts to Medicaid and other services are timed for 2029 to avoid backlash in the 2028 elections. This means they are willing to let Americans suffer later as long as they can stay in power now. Pete calls this strategy setting bombs to go off in the future. For example, while the bill immediately gives tax breaks to the rich, the cuts to health care and aid programs quietly begin years later when most voters are no longer paying attention. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 5, Democrats are scared to speak plainly. Pete and Tim agree that Democrats are often afraid to say what needs to be said. Pete talks about how Democrats sometimes talk down to voters, especially those who support Trump, instead of trying to understand why they feel left out. He admits that there's a sense of cultural snobbery in the party, where elite liberals talk about Trump voters like they're dumb, which only pushes them further away. For example, when educated Democrats say things like, "These people are voting against their own interests," it comes off as arrogant and only confirms the MAGA worldview that Democrats hate them. We're halfway through the video. Thanks for sticking with us. If you're enjoying it, hit the thumbs up and share it in your WhatsApp groups. If you'd like to support us, please tap the thanks button below. It helps us keep making great content. Drop a comment and don't forget to hit subscribe for more. Now let's continue with the video. Takeaway 6. Biden's COVID response made long-term damage. When asked what he would have done differently if he could go back to 2020, Buttigieg says the number one thing is reopening schools sooner. He says the delayed reopening caused real harm, not just politically, but for an entire generation of children. Pete also mentions that the administration underestimated how deeply inflation and prices would affect people. and that Democrats treated it like a side issue for too long. For example, he says that while they were right to prevent an economic collapse, they didn't speak enough about rising grocery costs that hit regular people hard. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 7. Democrats need to stop dreaming small. Pete urges Democrats to be more ambitious and imaginative. He says that while Trump lies, he dreams big and captures people's attention. In contrast, Democrats often talk about technical fixes instead of bold visions for the future. Pete points out that the country is facing enormous challenges like climate change and AI, and they can't be solved with small ideas. For example, instead of just protecting existing jobs, Democrats could promote a future where people work fewer hours, earn more, and live better because of how AI boosts productivity. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 8. America's university system is under attack. Pete defends the value of federal funding for universities like Harvard, which Republicans have targeted for political reasons. He says that grants going to Harvard are not handouts but contracts for solving problems like cancer research or veteran suicide. He adds that if we start punishing universities based on how their professors vote, then we are heading toward authoritarianism. For example, the Trump administration tried to cancel a project at Harvard simply because they disliked the school's politics, not because the project was useless or wasteful. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 9. Ukraine needs help, but Trump is in the way. Pete criticizes Trump for creating a leadership vacuum that is making Europe step in where America used to lead. He says that many Republicans privately support Ukraine but are too scared to go against Trump publicly. This has made it harder for the U.S. to offer help while Russia continues to gain ground. For example, Pete shares that during his time in the Biden administration, there was strong bipartisan support for Ukraine, but that has faded because Trump demands total loyalty, even if it means letting dictators like Putin win. Now let's move to the last takeaway. Takeaway 10. The future economy could be heaven or hell. Pete warns that with AI developing so fast, the future could either bring massive prosperity or complete disaster, depending on how we handle it. He says that if a few companies own all the powerful AI tools, they will control most of the wealth and power. On the other hand, if we make smart policies, AI could mean more free time and better pay for everyday people. For example, in the last 80 years, worker productivity increased 5 times, but people are still working as much or more. Pete asks, what if AI finally lets us work less and enjoy life more? Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, hit the thanks button below. It really helps us keep going. If you enjoyed this summary, please leave a like and share it in your WhatsApp groups. To join discussion about this video, drop a comment below. And for more videos like this, hit the subscribe button below.